Well, indeed, it's been an interesting week for sure. The Gambling Commission CEO took to the media finally, after 2 years, to assert that they have never mandated affordability checks. He is, of course, when he says that, suggesting that every gambling company has got it wrong. They've got the guidance wrong. We have overstepped the mark. Mandated checks so far on over 20% of our customer base. That's what he's saying, which means he hasn't been reading his own 2018 enforcement notice when all of this madness started. It was the outset of a series of revisions to their guidance informing operators to get behind these measures and what is known as single customer view. At one point, he made very clear to the operators at that time he would not accept them dragging their feet on single customer view, which would have represented an unprecedented invasion of people's financial data, requiring operators to pool that data with each other. All this followed a survey of affordability measures, which some 13,000 people, an unprecedented number of consumers, and mainly gamblers, of course, responded. The response was, as you can imagine, entirely negative to proposed plans for friction checks on punters simply wanting to do what they have done for decades: have a bet. The Commission took 1 year to respond to that survey. Perhaps they felt the delay would bring punters round to the idea that financial checks were coming anyway. They ignored the hugely negative response and pressed ahead with their focus on harm in gambling. Of course, all arguments when we discuss harm roundly ignore the huge positive mental effects and well-being of those who gamble. They published yet another update in April 2022, intended to come into effect in September of that year. A key clause read as follows: operators must conduct affordability assessments for individuals picked up by existing or new thresholds and triggers which indicate consumers experiencing harm, limiting or blocking further play until those checks have been concluded and supporting evidence obtained. Affordability checks across the industry, therefore, were a key part to that update. Operators, for example, were told to pay strong mind to Office of National Statistics analysis of people's earnings by area and by house. Whether that survey determined people living in Ascot might more likely, for example, to be a manager on an elevated salary, and so forth. This is a method of calculating someone's income so vague that it effectively mandated invasive checks on everyone depositing more than £500 a month, i.e. the minimum. That's £125 a week in deposits. A very small number for most gamblers, as you can appreciate. Of course, in discussing any policy implementation made by this regulator, you would reasonably assume that they paid mind to the law and tested and evaluated the effectiveness of any measure. But this simply has not occurred. Measure after measure has been foisted across the industry without any testing. They have a legal duty, of course, to consult with the industry. That's laid down in the 2005 Gambling Act. They evidently don't see it as important to respect the views they hear from that same industry, and indeed from the punters. The Commission has form in totally ignoring statutory processes. To do so is incredibly damaging in the relationship between regulator and regulated. It sows the seeds for judicial review of procedures which appear designed to limit the totality of gambling, not reduce problem gambling. Affordability measures should take into account a customer's rights to challenge the process. Instead, what happens across the industry is consumers are reasonably refusing to provide key financial data to a gambling company, and they're having their accounts closed or suspended. These are accounts, quite often, for people who have had them for decades without issues. This is a key point. The Commission is entirely aware of this, but is content to marginalise the rights of such individuals as they pursue their idealistic approach to regulation. Well, now, Mr. Rhodes is denying what they have been talking about in every speech and licence requirements and guidance over the last couple of years. They have ever mandated affordability checks. This despite multiple enforcement fines in precisely that vein. Call it what you like, Mr. Rhodes, affordability or financial checks. It amounts to exactly the same thing. You expect people to cough up their P60s or their bank statements, requirements which you prescribed to operators in order to have a bet. And might I add, permit yourselves as a government agency to view all their key personal, financial, private data as a government agency. I'm not sure where this all ends up. I am sure they will absolutely continue to fine operators on procedural failures based on entirely subjective views, i.e. that's the views of their commissioners, and hindsight-laden accusations. The gambling operators placed into the exchequers last year some £7 billion. It employs hundreds of thousands of people. More importantly, it provides highly enjoyable pastime to all. At some stage, my Big Brother colleagues are going to wake up from the rabbit in headlights syndrome they have been suffering from and send Lord Panic into bat via a judicial review of the behaviour of a bullying regulator, which pays scant regard to the law. Then, and only then, my friends, will order be restored to an industry which is vital to the United Kingdom.